have such a podcast vibe.
You think so?
You should, yeah, you look like a podcaster.
You know, every time I'm like in the shower or minding my business and I just have these thoughts come in my head about philosophical things and the Bible and God, I just start talking out loud as if I'm on my own podcast. And I'm like, you know what? It would be so cool to just start a podcast. I don't know who's going to just sit and listen to me yap, but maybe someone will. So I've thought about
Someone
it.
will.
Exactly. Like look at my little wall setup, all cute. I got
Exactly.
Black Jesus there. I got God is good all
Mm-hmm.
the time. You know what I mean? Like
All the time.
all the time. So,
Eat Jesus. Your
thank
hoodie.
Jesus. Dude, this is literally what I asked for my 25th birthday. That was my birthday present from my dad.
That's so nice. I like it.
Thank you.
I
I
need
was
I
so
need more
excited.
like Christian apparel. It's a vibe.
Like streetwear, that's what I was like on the hunt. And this one is silk lined. So,
Mm-hmm.
for us and our hair, it's better than just like a regular hoodie. I've been eyeing this one for months. So I was super excited when it came through.
Oh, period. All right, guys, welcome to episode 8, where we're going to be talking about church hurt. This is my friend Arianna, who I met
Hey.
at boarding school because I was
Yeah,
such
we
a
went to
good
boarding
child. I
school.
got sent there.
Yeah, it was really scary. It was really scary. I think we trauma bonded a little bit over that, but then she left very quickly. She left very
I didn't
quickly.
even finish the semester.
No, not even. She literally left in November. I actually remember getting the text where she was like, "Yeah, I'm gone. I'm gone." And I was like,
Is that
"Oh,
really how it happened?
yeah, I was
Did I
on
not say
my way
goodbye?
back." I don't know. I actually don't know. You might, girl, I'll be honest. You might not have. I remember being on my way back after a break. It was like October, November, and I got a text from you and you were just like, "Yeah, I'm not coming back." And I said, "No." My Sheila. I was so sad, but also not really surprised because you hated it there. You hated
I
it
didn't even
there.
give it a
So,
chance, if I'm being honest. Like, from the day I got there. Because the thing is, my friend, who I will not name, basically convinced me to go there. I was like, period. She's there. It's a new experience. Fine. And my mom was really pushing for me to go. So I
mm.
went. The day I got there, I was supposed to room with her. She was packing up her things. She's like, I'm going to AA. So I was
Why
like,
did she
oh,
not stay?
okay. I don't know, because we have friends at AA.
That's really
So, I mean,
sick.
like, because it's a different experience. It was, I mean, I get it. We were kids. At the same time, I was just like, this is a new school. I have no idea what I'm doing here. And the controlling, because one thing about me, I do not like being controlled. Like, if you have a good reason for telling me to do something, fine. But, ooh,
Like, genuinely, they did not need to have as many rules and regulations as they did. The extent that they were at, it was like up here, it needed to be like down here.
it just was, there wasn't leeway, I felt like. They would
Oh,
make us go to
really?
our rooms from, what time was it? It was like an hour and a half or something, where we had to be in our rooms doing homework. And I was like, okay, what if I already finished it? Or me personally, I can't do it in the evening. I always get up early at like 5 a.m. because that's when I'm
Mm-hmm.
sharpest and I do my homework then. So it's like, okay, so if I can't do it, I just have to be in my room, like can't
Yeah,
do
doing
anything.
what? We didn't have our phones
Right.
either.
Right. So
So
what
what are we
mischief
doing?
am I going to get into? I just want to go downstairs and play some piano, you know? I
Quite
can't even do
literally. And
that.
I remember that very specifically about you. Always downstairs on the piano, either on the piano or in the gym. I remember that very specifically
Yeah,
about you.
yeah, that's the only things. And I remember going there and wanting to go play basketball, and the only basketball court there was outside, like not the gym, but outside was by the guys' dorm.
Was
So I
by
went
the
over there to
boys' dorm.
play. I didn't know that it was like off limits. So I was playing over there and the guys kept looking at me crazy. I'm like, "What? You trying
Right.
1v1? Like what's the problem?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can't be over here. I can't play on the basketball court." Okay. I don't know. Just
It
a lot
was
of little things rub me the wrong way. Don't get me wrong. There was great people there. I'm so glad I went because I got to meet you and other people. Some of the teachers were
girl.
good too.
I got a lot of good experiences out of it. A lot of like really close friends, like still to this day. I do believe that although there were a lot of rules, like the staff really cared about us. Like that's not like what I'm saying. What I was not a fan of was the heavy amounts of like legalism that I saw. at the school. Just making it seem as if you do this or if you don't do this, your salvation is in jeopardy. Making it seem as if you did not subscribe to every little micro rule that you were not going to be saved because you're not listening to God, you're not listening to your convictions, even if that wasn't your conviction. Even if that was somebody else's conviction, they were just telling you you had to follow. I went to that school with the intention to seek Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, I went there because I was like, this is going to be a more spiritual place than where I'm coming from. I'm going to learn more and it's going to help grow my relationship with God. But it just felt as if I went and I did learn a lot. Like, don't get me wrong. I will give them that. I learned a lot about God. I learned a lot about the Bible, but it also felt as if their rules that I had not experienced before were so overwhelming to the point where I was just kind of like, I don't really know if I want to do this anymore. I don't know if this feels like a lot. I don't know if I can handle it. And so it was after I graduated from there that I finally started to I was always building my relationship with God there, but eventually building a relationship on my own, struggling with God on my own to find out what He was actually telling me, what He actually wanted me to do, what type of convictions were from Him and what type of convictions were coming from other people telling me that I should be convicted about. And that led to a lot of church hurt, religious trauma, feeling like if I don't do this, I'm quite literally not going to heaven. It took time to rebuild that relationship with God.
Do you feel like it may not, like from my experience, I've been through a lot of experiences where I easily could have been like, I'm done with church because of the way that the message was delivered. It's not necessarily that I had qualms with what they were saying I needed to do or not do, but I felt like, I don't know if this is your experience, which is what I'm asking, if they did a bad job explaining why this would even be something that you shouldn't do or why this is something that you should do, other than just saying this person said you should do it, so you should do it, or oh, the Bible says this, so just do it, versus explaining why I should be doing this. Because we were kids, we're not full grown adults. We are supposed to be being mentored and taught by these people. So I felt like they often did a bad job of explaining the why, and it was more so like, because I said so. And I did not like that vibe that I was getting, because Jesus was not just a because I said so type of God.
I think about a lot of the things that I learned there. Like I said, these micro rules, and I'm just going to use this one as an example. So I remember them saying, oh my goodness, you should not drink caffeine. And we were not allowed to have any caffeine in the dorms. If we went to town or whatever, could not bring coffee back, couldn't bring Mountain Dews, Coke, nothing, no caffeine, right? And that was their rule, no caffeine. Why can we not have caffeine? Because caffeine is a drug. Okay, technically, yes, caffeine is a drug. Sure. But just saying you can't have this because it's a drug is not actually very much of an explanation, because when I remember thinking back to that time, when I would drink caffeine or when I first started drinking it, I didn't feel like it even really did very much to me. I didn't feel very different. I didn't feel this and this and this. But to think that if I enjoyed this, that I can't be saved. Oh my goodness. Now, when I got a little bit older and I got into college, that addiction hit heavy. It hit heavy. And I don't know if it's because I never eased into it or because I was just like, oh my goodness, I need this to stay awake. Now, that's not healthy. What I realized as I got older and more into it, that it was like, okay, so if I am so reliant on it that I'm getting headaches when I don't drink it, that I can feel my heart racing to the point where I feel like it's gonna explode. Okay, now I'm starting to see why this is not great for me. And I feel like if that had been explained at any given point in time, then I would have had more information to make this decision. Okay, so this can have negative health consequences. Maybe I should take it slower. Maybe I should be a little bit more cautious versus just black and white, do this or don't. It's a sin if you do, but we're not going to actually explain what the issue is. It's just don't do it. just don't. So yeah, I feel like a lot of the time there was that lack of explanation, which would have been really helpful in not only understanding, but decision making just as a whole, you know?
Exactly. And I think when they're able to explain it, like, this is what could happen, this is my experience, then I feel like it also helps equip us to make those type of critical decisions in the future when we don't have someone on our shoulder telling us, do this, don't do this. Versus if they just set out a bunch of rules as to what you can and can't do without even explaining why, what do they think's going to happen when you're going out into the world by yourself and you have to actually critically think about your decisions and you don't know how to do that because all they did was just tell you what you can and can't do and go, I did a good job, you know?
I don't think it prepared me to go into the real world either, especially when it's so different. I think that he wants us to take good care of ourselves. He wants us to treat others well. But like, I don't know, it just felt very legalistic and very hard to follow and made me think that other people who were on their own journey were just not going to make it because they weren't living the way that I was taught we should be living,
Mm-hmm.
which again, traumatic because imagine thinking like, my goodness, my brother has a coffee addiction, my brother watches these movies that aren't about Jesus, my brother listens to secular music, like when he dies, am I ever gonna see him again? It's like, am I ever gonna see him in heaven? Like that's
Yeah.
really heavy, that's really hard, especially
Yeah.
when, like you said, we were kids.
The amount of pressure it puts on us because like we're still struggling, we're still learning, so then the entire time we're trying to go through this growth process we're just thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to hell? And that's such a terrible mindset to go into because God deals with progressive revelation. He deals with growth. That's like
Mm-hmm.
the whole Old Testament. Every few generations, he's revealing new light. Even after he came, he revealed even more light. He's patient with us. It says he's long suffering. He's not expecting this tall order and then going, if everybody doesn't have the same level of faith, the same level of understanding, then sorry, you missed it. You missed the cut. Like, no, maybe
Right.
he is demanding more of somebody else, and that's your conviction that you need to live up to. But maybe God sees my past and my life and like what's going on, and he's like, I'm not expecting you to be here. I'm expecting you to be here right now. Someday you'll be here, but we're growing. We're not jumping all the way up there. And it can be so damaging when someone who maybe their standard is up here is trying to force you or drag you up there when God is like,
Mm-hmm.
relax, we're not there yet. Let me do
Calm
it in
down.
my timing, not yours. Exactly. Calm down.
Exactly.
Slow
And
down,
I also feel
Savannah.
like that gets into the whole idea of salvation through works and not salvation through faith, when that has never been the case.
It's putting the cart before the horse. And that's what we're teaching these kids. And that's why they're struggling to move because they're putting the
Hmm.
cart before the horse and then going, why am I not going anywhere? This faith must not be real. It's not effective and it must be false.
Exactly.
And that's why so many leave because they're hurt.
I was having this conversation with a friend quite literally this week who is going through a new set of like revelations. She is just so invested in learning everything she can about the Bible. It feels like it kind of like hit out of nowhere. Like she's always had a heart for God, but like just this new revelation. And she'll talk to me about lifestyle choices that she wants to change. She wants to do this and that, like wants to do differently. And then she was telling me that all of a sudden, in the past 2 or 3 weeks, she was changing something very, very significantly in her life that she has struggled with for years. And she was just like, in tears about the goodness and graciousness of God, that as she just got closer to Him, her desire for those things just went away. She wasn't like, okay, I need to give this up so that I can be close to him. She was just like, as I continue to get closer to him, I want it less. And that's exactly what you were saying, like putting the cart before the horse, telling someone, you have to give this up in order to go to God. You have to do this. You have to do this or you're not going to be saved. That's so much pressure, especially if they haven't felt that conviction yet. That's going to make them feel like God doesn't actually want them until they're perfect, which again has never ever been the case. One of my favorite verses, Matthew 11:28-30. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. He's talking about people who are tired, people who are depressed, people who are struggling. Come to me, all of you who don't know which direction to go in, and I will give you rest. Come as you are. That phrase that we say all the time, but people don't actually put into practice as often as they should. Come as you are, and I will give you rest. And that rest can just look like as you get closer to God, He's removing your desire to do things that you know are harmful for you or that He believes are harmful for you.
Or that you might not have even known was harmful for you, you
Right.
know?
Maybe He'll show
That's
you
part of
something you
it.
never would have guessed.
And it's only his love that could have changed that. There's also a verse, cast your cares upon him because he cares for you. He's the one that transforms us. He loves us. He's like, you're my child. I would literally die. I did literally die for you. Like, this is the
Yeah.
type of relationship that he wants, to be
Mm-hmm.
close friends. He's like, abide in me and I'll abide in you. Like, let's be together. So this isn't a
Mm-hmm.
God that he's like, pretend you're perfect. You can't. He knows that. You know that. There's that verse, I think I mentioned it in the last episode, where he's like, he knows our frame. He knows we're dust. He's like, he's already got that. You don't have to put up any type of facade in front of him. But I feel like what the church sometimes does, even if it's unintentional, is that in order to get us to the point that God wants us, they teach us that we have to be a certain way instead of saying, come to God and let him transform you to be that certain way. We try to put all the work on ourselves. And Jesus already said it. He said, without me, it's impossible. But with me, all things become possible. So it's about relationship. I love that you mentioned that. Okay, what happened that led to the hurt or disillusionment that you experienced in the church? Like, you talked about your boarding school experience a little bit, but can you dive a little bit
I
deeper
did.
as to what it was?
Yes. Because I love this conversation. I loved talking about this because I just, like, to me, it was so insane. Let me get into it. I was 20. So it was a few years ago. I was 20 and I felt like God was calling me to do a mission year, right? And so it was COVID. I couldn't really leave the country. I couldn't really go anywhere. So I was like, hello, where am I going to go? Like, what am I going to do? And I felt as if God opened the door and called me to another boarding school. Another boarding school. I was like, oh my goodness. And it was in Montana, the middle of nowhere. It was a very quick process, like submitting that application, interviewing, all of that. It was very quick, like the speed with which it moved. I was like, okay, this is seeming like somewhere I need to be. And then I got the position. I was an assistant dean at that boarding school. Like, I was so excited to go. It was so random because like Montana's very outdoorsy. I was not outdoorsy. Put me inside now. Like, I was not outdoorsy, but I was super excited and I really felt like God was leading in that direction. And so I was like, okay, cool. I got there. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. I loved it there. Like, honestly, if I could have stayed the rest of my life, probably I would have. And I prayed about it and I didn't feel like God was opening those doors. So I was like, okay, I gotta go. But where am I going? Because I was living in like the DC area at the time, and I was living with my mom, and then my mom moved out of the DC area. So it's not like I could go back. Like, I didn't have a home there. I still had family there, but like my home wasn't there. The school that I was at quite literally cut my major. They just cut it. So it's not even like I could go back and just like live in the dorms or whatever. I was like, okay, I have to find a new school, a new state to live in. What do I do? And
Yeah.
so I was praying so heavy because I just felt so lost. First of all, now I don't know what to study. I also don't know where to go to school. And all of these schools are so expensive. I can't afford it. Like, what am I gonna do? And then there was one school that I really wanted to go to. It was called Walla Walla University in Washington State. I had always known about this school. I had some friends that were there. My mom was offered a job there at one point. I literally almost moved there when I was a kid, but it had just never really been on my radar. But then being in Montana, like, that school was closer, and I worked at summer camp right after that in Idaho. So many of those kids were at that school, and so it was just like, dang, I kind of felt like I was on the outside looking in, like, I really want to go here. I think the school was maybe $44,000 a year, so it was like ridiculously expensive.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be like so heavy in debt. And so I prayed and I set time frames, God, like, will you please give me an answer by this time? And so there was a date that I had set, like, Lord, like, please give me an answer. And then I think it was that day, there was a recruiter from that school there. I went up to him and I was just like, hey, so my name is Arianna. I really, really want to go to your school. I basically just told him kind of like a little bit about myself, and he was like, you need to call this woman. Here's her number. Tell her exactly what you told me. I was like, okay. So I called her, and basically she was just like, yeah, I'm gonna give you money. Yeah, I got you. And she
Period.
just basically like gave me some sort of scholarship, some sort of fund that like she didn't make me apply for it or anything. She was just like, yeah, you know what? Yeah. And she just did it. And so the
Yeah.
timing of it, insane, but then also just the provision, like this mad provision that was nothing I'd ever seen before. And honestly, something that could have only been given through him was like so crazy. And I was so excited and I was so relieved. So I'm like, God just really, really opened the doors for me to go to the school that I wanted to be at so badly, like so badly. And so after summer camp, I go stay with my family for a little bit. My family like lives in Puerto Rico, so it was like a distance. So I was literally moving my whole life across the country. And
Mm.
so I got to Walla Walla, and I think it was during orientation week, I met this guy who was the brother of one of my friends. And he was really friendly to me, and I didn't know a lot of people, so I was like, okay, cool. If we fast forward a little bit, he ends up sexually assaulting me so severely that legally, it's considered rape. It was bad. And it was one of those things where, like, listen, my other qualm with the church is the way that they don't talk about sex. And because they don't talk about sex, they set us up for failure because we don't know what's safe and what's not safe. But
And what
that's
they
a
don't
whole
learn in the
nother
church,
topic.
they're going to go learn it elsewhere. And the people that they're going to go learn it from may
Exactly.
not be teaching them the right stuff. So
Or the
I don't know why
sources
they
that they
choose.
learn it from
Right.
might be really
And I feel
dangerous.
like
Like,
they know
it's,
this. I feel like they know this. So
well,
why
they
don't
should.
they just talk
They
about it?
should. They should.
If they don't, they
Actually,
should. So,
Actually, for my research class this year that I'm about to wrap up in this next week or so, we study the correlation between forms of sex ed and like religious upbringing and what impact that has on how much college students know, like their sexual literacy,
mhm.
their knowledge, or whatever. It's some of the stories we got there, crazy. But that's off topic. I could talk about
Right.
that for hours.
That could be its own
But,
episode for
and
real.
girl, if you want to do another one, I got you. I
Hey, I'm
got
down.
you.
Let's do it. The kids need someplace to learn
No,
about
because
this. So,
quite literally, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it another time. That being said, I knew I had such little knowledge of anything that it's one of those things that I didn't even realize it was an assault until I was talking to people and telling them my experience. They're like, girl,
like, wait a
that's
second.
that's not good. And I was like, oh, word? Crazy.
Word.
I didn't know. Word? Just like that?
And
Crazy.
the fact that I've had conversations with like two friends where I had to break it to them that what they went through was in fact assault and they didn't even for real
No.
realize it. That is so insane. And within the church
It's
as well.
so
That's
insane. And that's another,
heartbreaking.
it's another hurt that I feel like the church is causing its young people is that when they choose to ignore situations instead of addressing them, it causes a lot of misinformation and lack of knowledge, things that are really critical for our safety. And we just don't know. So I told a few people, and they were like, yeah, that's actually assault. And as I started thinking about it, I was like, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense. Because I remember every day just being like worried about where I might see him, where I might run into him. And sometimes it's like you're just worried that it's just going to be awkward or like, oh, maybe that might be weird if I like run into this person after this. But it was like a fear. I was scared. And after they told me, like, hey, girl, this is giving assault, I was like, oh, well, checks
Hmm.
out. So it took me a few months to be able to open up to my parents and stuff about it. But my mom is a former like Title IX coordinator. My mom has worked within the church my entire life, but my mom is also a counselor, like a licensed therapist and whatnot. She's very not naive to like the world and how things should be handled. So she was telling me, you need to report it, they need to have it on record, like you need to do this and this and this in case like he does it to someone else. So I was like, okay, I can do that. Now, after I reported it, she was like, honestly, you should just leave it at that because the investigation process is brutal. Like, it's really, really hard and it's really sick and it's gonna be probably like very traumatizing. But me, I am such a big advocate for myself and for other people that I took a lot of time to think about it. I took a lot of time to pray about it, of course, but I was like, you know what? I don't want to walk around feeling unsafe on my campus. I've been doing this all year. It's not fair. Like, it's not fair. I took a lot of time to think and pray, and I decided, like, no, I want to go through with this investigation process. I want them to look into it. I want them to see that I should be safe because I'm walking around worried about my safety every single day. I remember, like, when I first got into the Title IX process or whatever, they were in between Title IX coordinators. So the woman who like took my story for the first time was literally a relative of the guy who assaulted me, which
Oh my
is like
gosh.
not, like I went in there and
Yeah.
she did tell me that they were related. And I asked her, can I just like tell you my story? You just tell me if it even like holds any weight. And I was just talking about like, let's just have a conversation. But then she ended up being the one to take the notes. She ended up being the one to pass it on, which is not what I meant, but that's what happened. And
Right.
I was like, I don't even know.
Why would they even allow her to be the one to do the interview? Like, that's
I
so
don't know if it's like
biased.
she did like the intake. I don't know if you can do that, but she
Okay.
did. And she was involved in a lot of it. She did tell me and she did like preface it, I haven't seen him in a long time, but I was just asking like kind of like personal off the record like conversation. Can we just talk about it? What do you think? That's not what happened. And then I had to go talk to the Title IX coordinator when he stepped into like his role. And my first conversation with him, he basically told me that like that I didn't really have a case. He was just kind of like, yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to prove this. Like, I don't, you could try, but I don't really know that you got a case going on. I was like, oh, I understand there are some situations that are very he said, she said. It's hard to
Yeah.
prove, especially since this is months later. And because I didn't realize that it was assault, it's not as if I went to the police. I just wanted, I just wanted to be safe, It took a lot of time and prayer. Is this something I should go through with? But eventually I felt like, okay, this is something I should go through with. I remember they didn't even give us a no contact right off the bat during the Title IX. Like, I had to ask for one because a lot of the times you come and you start reporting and they'll just give it to you. I had to ask for it. And then I remember the process took months. And I remember, girl, I was on my Zoom. I was like, pulling up screenshots. I was finding texts, like telling friends about it that had
Hmm.
nothing, like no association with the school. And these were things that saved me, Like, I remember calling up people that I had talked to about it and just being like, hey, will you witness for me on this? Will you talk for me on this? Will you advocate for me on this? I was on my Zoom, girl. I was stacked up. Like,
Hmm.
this man who assaulted me quite literally hired a lawyer to defend him. And then at
Hmm.
the end of the case, he still came out responsible. They were still like, yeah, it seems like he did assault her. It seems like he did do this. Like, this is more likely. And I remember I was so invested in this. Like, I'm reading all the details. I'm finding discrepancies. Like, he's literally not even able to keep up with his story. He's contradicting
Yeah.
himself. Like, if you look at it, it's so clear that he was lying. And so when the results came back, like, yeah, he assaulted her, I was like, okay, fantastic. Maybe now they'll take care of it. Maybe now I can go to school in peace and not walk around every day like scared for my safety. So in a Title IX process, it goes through an investigation and then it goes to a separate set of decision makers. I remember it went to the decision makers and I am a social work major, right? One of the decision makers was the dean of the School of Social Work, and they decided not to dismiss him, simply because of his proximity to graduation. That was their entire reasoning. That's what they gave me in writing, everything. They were like, yeah, he is so close to graduating. Like, we think we can like give them some no contacts and whatever, and like it'll be fine, but they can probably both keep going to school here. It's probably fine. And I was like,
So if he assaults
what?
someone else within that little time frame before he graduates, they're cool with that? Like no
I
consequences
guess
just
so.
because he's about to
I guess so.
graduate?
I guess so. They think, you know what? Yes, he did commit a crime, but we're willing to take the chance that in 3 months, like, he's not gonna do it again. Like, he can't.
And that is part of the problem with religious institutions is that I notice they will cover up things instead of openly reprimanding them because they think if we actually reprimand, then it's going to be public. People are going to have a bad image of us. But I'm like, the thing giving you a bad image is you trying to cover up stuff instead of exposing it. The Bible says expose the evil works of darkness.
Works of
It says
darkness.
expose it, but we keep trying to cover it up, and then we kind of use like religious reasons or the Bible or whatever to excuse it. But I'm like, Bible's not on your side. It's literally talking about exposing this stuff and to do it for their sake because that person, if we care about them as Christians, we want them to be restored. So even Paul would be like, all right, at some point, if this person isn't willing to be restored, we got to expel them. Not because we hate them, but because we hope that by this consequence, it'll wake them up to the gravity of what they did and hopefully bring them back to repentance. So not only are you not helping the actual victim in the situation, you're also not helping the perpetrator learn what they did was wrong and I don't know, change, repent, apologize. Like nobody's being benefited by this at all.
Exactly,
Sorry,
exactly.
that's my
And
little
it's
tangent.
like, no, because girl, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, and
yeah.
I can talk about that for hours and hours and hours. I see it so often. I'll come back to that. I hope I remember. But yeah, so hearing that was already like, it felt like earth shattering because I'm literally telling these people, you guys, I am genuinely scared for my life. And I was so hurt that it was like, the dean of the School of Social Work, I'm literally one of yours. I'm literally
Mhm.
one of yours. And you're just gonna disregard everything that you see here. It was really, really hard because, girl, when I tell you, I had people fighting for me, like advocating for me. I had staff members, the school chaplain was advocating for me. Who was it? Their student success coordinator, my mentor. There was this pastor who was like one of their religion teachers. He was fantastic. Like just I had like people heavily advocating for me. I reached out to VP of Student Life because someone recommended it to me and because I knew that people were already talking to him, like advocating on my behalf. Like they were aware of this like specific case. And so I reached out to him and I was just like, listen, I love this place so much. I have built a life for myself here. I have friends. I was going to work on their student association, like spiritual team. Like I was so excited for that. I did not want to leave. I remember him being like, oh, I don't know that there's really anything I can do, but I'll try. Okay. What do I do with that? Okay, sure. Then I didn't hear anything from him. Basically, had to make the decision to transfer schools and move across the country from Washington State to Tennessee without prepping for it, without planning, without anything. It was super last minute because the school in Tennessee started literally like a month before they did. So all of a sudden, like my summer is cut short. I had no time to process what just happened at all. All of a sudden, I'm just in this new place, like doing this new thing. And so I reached back out to him and I was just like, listen, I need you to know how heartbroken I am about this decision. I don't want to have to leave, but I don't really see another choice. First of all, he didn't respond to me for 10 days. And he only responded after one of the people advocating for me sent this long email about the injustice of it and what they were teaching their boys that it was okay to just do this and be able to get away with it.
Mhm.
He didn't respond to me for 10 days. And then when he finally responded, he was just kind of like, oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. By the way, like, I used to be a teacher at the school that you're going to go to. It's a great place. I'll be praying for you. I'll be praying for you. And I was like, I looked at that email. I just looked at it up and down. I said, Doug, I know you're not serious right now. Like, I
Right.
know you're joking. Like, I know there's no way that not only did you not do anything, but you're going to be out here talking about, you're going to pray for me. You're going to pray for me when it's in your power to act. It's in your power to advocate. But instead, you're just going to say a little prayer and pretend like it doesn't exist
Mm-hmm.
anymore. You're just going to push me to the side and be like, dang, that sucks. Like, what do you mean? Like, genuinely,
That pissed me off.
what are you saying right now?
And I hate when people hide behind prayer when they actually have the ability to do something about it. I'm like, prayer is so powerful. Stop trying to use it as your little human shield to not act. The point of prayer is to empower you to act in God's will. So, like, what are you talking about right now? I'll pray for you. Can't even fake empathy.
Using prayer as a cloak for being religious when God says that true religion is taking care of the orphans and the widows, basically those in need, and you're just going to say, oh, I'm going to pray for you to look like you care when you
There's
don't, to
literally
look
this
like you're
verse in
religious.
James 2 where he's talking about how important it is to pair works with your faith. And he gives that
Mm-hmm.
example of seeing those poor people, and instead of actually going and clothing them because they're naked and they don't have any food, the guy just goes, be warm, be filled, and then keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, what are
Yeah,
you saying right now? Clothe me and feed me. What do you
exactly.
mean, be warm, be filled, and going on your way?
Exactly.
That's literally what that sounds like.
Well,
I could help
yes.
you,
And
but I won't. Praying for you,
praying for you. Be well, have fun.
right?
What? It's giving like, whatever you do to the least of these, done unto me. So it's crazy because I just could not comprehend that. I just could not. And I was so hurt and I was so taken aback. I have no time to process what just happened before I'm thrown into a school that's much bigger. And it's like I had my life ripped away from me with no say, no choice, no warning. So I would say about 3 weeks into the school year, it was so heavy. It was so depressing. Like I ended up attempting suicide, because I was just like, wow, this, I can't do this. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And girl, when I tell you that I was so, so mad at God, so mad at God, I was screaming, crying, like cursing him out, like just so angry and so confused. I was like, God, how is it that I felt like you brought me to this place, and I felt like you led me to do this report. You led me to go into this investigation, and I prayed and fasted so heavily all the time, like, please let me get justice from this. Let me see, your works through it. And I did feel like he worked. I won the case, and then all of a sudden, all of that for what? It was traumatizing to go through the whole thing from the assault to the investigation just for it to come to nothing. I just couldn't do it anymore. Like the pain of not being able to process the assault in and of itself, and then all of a sudden being in a new place, new people, just feeling so lonely and so betrayed and abandoned by God. It was really insane. So that's when I attempted, and then I was hospitalized for a little bit and got out, and yeah, that was really tough. The hurt and the pain that I was feeling was caused by people who claim the name of God. And I know that we are imperfect. I know that we are imperfect beings, and we're going to mess up and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to hurt people. But some things are just so simple when you know the character of Christ. You think about the woman caught in adultery, how the Pharisees wanted to stone her, wanted to just leave her for dead, and Jesus was the one that stepped in to save her. Some things are just so simple when you know the character of God. And so to not only just claim to know God, but then to be in a position of power that you would not have gotten to if he had not intervened on your behalf, and then to still just dismiss his children and do the exact opposite of what he calls you to do?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, insane to me. And I really
Very.
believe that God holds those people more accountable because God doesn't mess with his name being mocked. God does not mess with his name being taken in vain. So that was really, really off putting, unsettling, and really discouraging. And to just get to a place of just feeling so hopeless because the people that God had appointed to lead and protect his children refused to do so. Yeah, that's where my disillusionment really kicked in.
No, because like it's genuinely so baffling to me because God instituted this church so that we could really support each other because he knew that we can't do this in loneliness. He knows that we need other people. And so he sets the system up through the early church leaders so that we could have that support system so that we could help each other out. And he knew it was going to be a little bit messy because like you said, we're imperfect. But to this degree where it's almost gotten back to the time where Jesus came and was like, this season needs some serious intervention because the religious leaders, not only are they refusing to enter into my rest, into my kingdom, they're blocking the way so that others can't come in either. And I feel like we've come full circle and gone back to that point that he tried to save us from and correct, to where we have religious leaders today who have greater responsibility to steward these people. And instead of being the ones that are serving, because Jesus demonstrated how should we lead? And he led by serving, by being the lowest. And instead of doing the same, they're using their positions of power to cover up corruption rather than exposing it. So that's just so insane to me, and that they're being completely backwards and being everything that Jesus said not to be. Let's not forget it. Jesus was a victim of church hurt, you know? It's
Oh, for
not
sure.
atheists that killed him. It was his own religious leaders from his own faith, his own culture, that said, we're going to murder you. And even then, Jesus was like, Lord, forgive them. He saw that they were all just completely misguided, broken people. And even then, we still miss the point somehow, to where we're just
Exactly.
emulating the Pharisees again instead of emulating
Exactly.
Christ. And it's just so sad.
Exactly. And I think a lot about how did I end up coming back to a God that seemed to abandon me, because I have never agreed with, this administration's decision, and I've never actually thought that they represented, like, that they were a good representation of who God really is, because that's not the God that I know, and that's not the God that I ever knew. I think my disillusionment with God himself came from when I felt like he was being silent, because I think about the day that I attempted, I was
Yeah.
Ooh, gosh, I remember like very, very clearly. My dad and my brother were visiting me, and my whole family sat me down, and they were like, Arianna, like, we don't like seeing you like this. What can we do to help? And I just really didn't feel like there was anything they could do. And so I felt really hopeless, and it made me feel even more hopeless to see them feel hopeless. And so when my dad and my brother were leaving, I dropped them off at the airport. And I remember hugging my brother like really tightly because I had packed a bunch of pills in my backpack. And I was like, the next time I'm going to see him is either Thanksgiving or this is the last time I'm ever going to see him. I dropped him off and then I left, and I drove into a church parking lot. I have never been to this church before, but I'm sitting in this church parking lot and I'm like screaming, cussing God out. I'm so mad. I'm so hurt. And I just don't feel like I hear anything from him. Because, sometimes in those moments where you really need him, maybe you'll get a phone call. Like maybe you'll get a text. You'll get something that just like reminds you that he's still there, or that he's thinking about you, or it's just like, wow, this person is really a godsend. It was nothing. It was nothing. And I remember being in the church parking lot and thinking to myself, like, I'm literally in a church parking lot, like screaming out for God. I know that I'm yelling at him, but he knows that I just need something. I need someone. And there's nothing. It's like no one's gonna walk out of this church and just be like, huh, I've never seen that car before, and this is a weird time for people to be here. Like, maybe I should go check it out. And these are just thoughts in my head, you know, but I was just feeling like super, super abandoned. And so, like, that's when I decided, like, I wrote a little suicide note typey. It wasn't really a note as much as it was just kind of like putting my thoughts on paper. And I was like, if someone finds it, they find it. If not, you know, they don't. And then I ended up in the hospital. I was in the hospital for a few days, which was also not a great experience. It was kind of traumatizing in and of itself. Coming out of it, it was hard finding my way back to God because God has done such incredible things for me before. So it was hard thinking like, okay, I'm really mad at you because I don't understand this, but also I know that I need you. So what, like, I don't really know how to proceed or like where to go from here. And so whenever I'm like reading the Bible and I don't understand something, I'll like look up like commentary. So I'm like looking up commentary for stories, and this story had nothing to do with the death of Jesus, but for some reason they like pivoted, and they started talking about Jesus on the cross, and they were saying that when Jesus was on the cross, he was crying out to God, you know, my God, why have you forsaken me? God didn't answer. God didn't intervene. Essentially, God was silent at that moment, but just because he was silent doesn't mean that he was absent. And if he had intervened at that moment, then the plan of salvation never would have come to fruition. All of Jesus' suffering up to that point would have been for nothing. And that just kind of like blew me away. Oh my goodness. You know, in the greater scheme of things, like I don't know the entire purpose of what I went through, why I went through it, who my story is going to help, you know, assuming that it does. But I just wonder, you know, like I was so mad at God for not intervening, but just because he was silent at that moment doesn't mean that he had left me. And I was having this conversation with the same friend I was talking about earlier, where I was reflecting on that moment. And, you know, like, let's say that God had intervened. Let's say that somebody had called me. Let's say that I had gotten a text that is just kind of like, oh my goodness, this feels like I really needed this at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I never attempted. I never would have ended up in the hospital. I never would have had a time to like reset. I don't think that the people around me ever would have fully realized like how much suffering I was going through if I would have just kind of covered it up for a little bit. You know, like if I had just gotten like a little bit of relief for a little bit, I don't think I ever would have gotten to the place where I was fully seeking healing. And so, although it seemed really cruel for God, like, not to intervene at that very moment, I think that the purpose was greater than what I could have ever seen. And also, you think about when someone you know is struggling or is really going through it. And sometimes, you know, they don't really want advice. They don't want
Mm-hmm.
advice. They don't want an opinion. They just need someone to sit there with them so that they're not alone. And if you do say something, it might make it feel worse. And so I think it's one of those things that actually, if he had said anything to me, I don't know that it would have helped. I don't know that it would have made a difference, because there are some times where really silence just is the most healing option. And so I was so mad at him for being silent, but it took me a long time to realize his silence was not his absence, but it was also his way of making sure that I got what I needed, of making sure that I found the care and the comfort that I was looking for.
Wow, that is so powerful. I hear this quote and I think of it often when it's like, you don't scream when you're right next to the person. I'm paraphrasing. It was worded a lot more poetically. But like, it's true. When I'm right next to you, I'm not going to be screaming at the top of my lungs. And I'm the type of person, I love to sit in silence. Me and my boyfriend will do that. Like, we're not talking, we're not doing anything, but we are just sitting in each other's presence, and that alone is so comforting. So I think God does that a lot when he knows words won't help. I'm so glad you're here today still. And it's so inspiring, honestly, that after everything that you went through, that you still stuck with God, because I know so many people that they were hurt by what they perceived to be God's doing, or hurt by someone in the church, and it was like one and done, they left. And while it's understandable, like how hurtful that can be, how disillusioning that can be, and why you wouldn't want to be part of that again, it's still so sad to see them go, because I'm like, that's not Jesus though. And so to see you crawl back from that and to be where you are today is just so beautiful. What would you say to someone who went through something similar, who might have experienced hurt by someone or multiple people, or who may have felt hurt or abandoned by God? Like, what would you tell them today?
Just like you said, if somebody has been hurt by the church and they decide to leave, I understand. Like, I get why you would not want to be here anymore. Unfortunately, there's too many people who claim the name of Christ who don't live the way that he is teaching us. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about like rules, rules, rules. I mean in the way that you treat people. When asked what the greatest commandment was, God said, love. Like, the greatest of these is love, and we don't see that enough in the church. So when I hear someone saying like, yeah, I don't believe in God, or I don't mess with God, I don't mess with the church, and then they open up to me about why, it's really, really unfortunate. However, that being said, and I'm so adamant about this, the people that hurt you, the way that they acted, the way that they treated you, what they did or said to you, that is not the God that I know. And that is not the God of the Bible either. And it's heartbreaking to see how his message and his character have been so grossly perverted. But I mean, honestly, it's not surprising. You know, Satan has been going after the church forever. And so, you know, what better way than to misalign the name of Christ with the character of Christ? So it's really, really heartbreaking to see. I know that I do my best to show the character of God to those that I come in contact with, because I don't want to misrepresent Christ. I genuinely believe that he is love in, you know, like every form. And I want other people to see that, and I want people to know that. So I would just say the people that hurt you, that claim the name of Christ, that claim the name of Jesus, that is just not the God that I know. The God that I know, if you read the Bible, Desire of Ages displays the character of Christ so beautifully, genuinely so
Beautifully.
beautifully, so like so much care and compassion in a way that I've never heard of before, and just
Never
goes
even
more in depth
considered.
about, or even considered, like, or even considered, like, it's insane,
Mhm.
goes so much more in depth about the God of the Bible. And so I would just say, learn about the Jesus of the Bible. And if that means that you need to take a step back from the church, do what you gotta do. I could never blame someone from taking a step back from the church and like studying or trying to figure things out for themselves, because unfortunately, a lot of the times it is when you take a step back from the influence of other people that you will find what you believe for yourself. And I'm not saying leave the church. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that if you don't have that personal relationship with God built on your own, they're going to let you down every single time. So if your only knowledge and understanding of God comes from the people that you're surrounding yourself with, the people that you see at school or that you see at church, you're always going to be disappointed. So this is a God that you need to have a personal experience with yourself. If you know people who seem to find that joy in Christ, and it doesn't seem like, if it doesn't seem forced, you know, it doesn't seem like they're just doing what they're supposed to do, but like genuinely, oh my goodness, that person seems like their relationship with God is real. It seems like they really believe this. They seem really happy. They seem passionate. They want to talk about this. You know, ask people that seem as if they really have God influencing their lives. You know, how did you do this? What makes you love God? What makes this right for you? How did you experience Christ this way? But in all actuality, I would say, you know, find God, find the Jesus of the Bible for yourself, is what I would say. And eventually, we need people, we need community. So whenever you're ready and whenever you're led to the right community, come back if you need to. Like I said, you need community, but this is something that you need to figure out for yourself first, I think.
I like that you emphasize having that relationship with God for yourself because people will let you down every time. And there's a verse, I'm not sure exactly where it's found, but it basically talks about not building on any other foundation other than the one that
Mm-hmm.
was laid, which is Jesus Christ. And Jesus is often likened to cornerstone or a rock or build your house on solid ground. Nothing else in this world is going to be solid but Christ. So if we're looking to people as that foundation or the church as that foundation, it's going to crumble like sand every time because
Every time.
we aren't perfect yet. We're still making
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. A lot of people are coming in. There's even a verse that talks about people that are coming in to be spiritual leaders that are actually wolves in sheep's clothing. And they're like, hey, beware, because this exists in the church too. So if they are our foundation and we don't know what your intentions are, what my intentions are, it is going to be so easy to get hurt, so easy to get disillusioned and leave and never want to come back. But God is like, but if you know me and you make me the foundation, when you see people doing that, like for me personally, when I see people doing that, yes, it's hurtful, but I've gotten to a place now where instead of just being hurt by it, instead I kind of feel sorry for them because I'm like, oh, so you don't know my Jesus. You don't know him, and that makes me very sad for you. And there's that verse where it says, so many are going to be like, Lord, Lord, we did this, this, that. And he's going to be like, away from me, you who practice
Mm-hmm.
lawlessness. Because the point of the law is not like to appear a certain way or whatever. The whole point of the law is love. The law is structured in a
Mm-hmm.
way because God says he is love. The law is the expressed will. It shows what his character is like. He's like, this is how I want you to love your neighbor. This is how I want you to love me. And when you do these things, you guys are going to be happy. You'll be treating each other the way that I've treated you, which is with sacrificial love, agape love. That's the point of the law. So when you've missed that mark, that's what sin is. You missed the mark. You've erred. You haven't understood or grasped the point of the law, the point of why I'm asking you to do these things, which is literally just for your safety and happiness, and so that you are treating each other with the love that I've shown you. And so it's so sad when I see people that are unkind and just hurtful and dismissive and just everything that Jesus wasn't. And so when I see that happen even to me, I no longer feel like personally attacked. I'm just kind of like, "Oh, that's very sad. I feel very sorry for you." And I think that's kind of the attitude that even Jesus had, which is why when he was on the cross being literally murdered and mocked by them, he wasn't just like, "Ugh, how dare you?" He was just like, wow, y'all really didn't get it.
You don't get it.
Lord,
Yeah.
please forgive them.
They
They
don't
don't know
know.
what they're doing.
They don't know. And
Like
that's
they've
so
clearly
insane to me to
misunderstood.
just think that like he had that level of compassion for people who hurt him so deeply. And that being said, I think that there is an idea of our church like, oh, we need to show compassion, we need to show mercy. I think about like, I'm just using my situation as an example. Maybe they were like, oh, we're not going to dismiss him because we want to be compassionate. You know, he's so close. Like, let's let him finish. But although Jesus had compassion and he prayed, Lord, forgive them, God did not pull any punches when he was talking about the Pharisees. When he was telling them how they were to their face, no, literally, like, there's compassion, but there's still accountability. There has always been
Always.
accountability. Always. And that's one thing that I feel like the church, they don't want to deal with hard things,
Hmm.
so they dismiss it under the guise of mercy. Always. Like
That
I
is
feel like
insane.
that happens so much more than it should.
Yes.
They don't hold people accountable.
They
People
really don't.
continue to get hurt, and then they continue to mar the name of God. Like,
Because
it's just how
even
it
if
goes.
Jesus forgives, he'll be like, yes, I'm so glad you repented. I forgive you. But here is still the consequences of those actions because he needs us to know that we can't just keep going around willy nilly doing what we want. What we do has consequences. So even after repentance,
Exactly.
he's like, great, we're reconciled. I'll still be with you. But there are still, like with David, David was a man after
That's what
God's own heart, but
that's
he
what
did a
I'm thinking.
wicked thing.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
his child ended up dying as a result of what he did. He's like, I love you. You're still a man after my own heart, but like there's still going to be consequences to what you did.
Yep.
And so like even in his
That's
mercy, there are still consequences.
no, for sure. And I mean, I think that the consequences are kind of like a sign of his mercy because I mean, like the
Mhm.
consequences coming are like such a clear indicator like, oh yeah, I need to not do that anymore. Like that was wrong. And you mentioned his law earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just thinking, I was just talking to someone about this. God's law is there as a way of protection, not as a way of control. And I think that's something we often like miss with like our experience with the church, with a lot of like legalism that we see. It's just rules, rules, rules. Why are these rules here? Well, in all actuality, it's to keep us safe. But a lot of the time, we don't talk about that.
Any good parent has boundaries
Exactly.
in place to keep you safe, and an even better parent will explain why those boundaries are there instead of just saying
Mm-hmm.
because I said so. Because a parent can have good
Exactly.
intentions, but if you don't communicate why those boundaries are there, that child might feel like you're a tyrant even if you're not. So a good parent,
Exactly.
and God is a good parent, he explained why, he showed us why. So,
Exactly.
and one thing you said earlier actually that got me, because the quote I was thinking of, it said some of you are sitting at tables that God sent you to flip. And that part got me because when you're like, God does
Hey.
not pull back punches, right? I'm thinking,
Hey.
that's the same Jesus that was flipping tables, cracked out his whip, right?
Flipping
So, like, some
tables.
of y'all are
Flipping
sitting
tables.
there and you're supposed to be flipping
Flipping
it.
tables. I literally posted this like on my story before, Lord, forgive me for craving a seat at the table that you would have flipped. Like if you look in my Instagram bio, it literally says, you want to be like Jesus? Might have to flip some tables. Cause
Right.
what is that? What is this? Like trying to live in peace with man at the expense of hurting God's children. I just
Mhm.
don't think so. And I mean, obviously, live in peace as much as you can. But there are some times where you just cannot turn a blind eye to injustices in the name of keeping things peaceful. Because Jesus was never like that. He was never like that.
Jesus was peaceful, but there's that verse that says, be peaceable as much as is possible. Like, there's obviously a
Mm-hmm.
limit where you have to stand up and stand out and do something. And Jesus, like, I like that you mentioned the desire of ages. I think it does a good job of depicting Jesus as, like, anytime he interacted with anybody, it was always for the purpose of restoring them, both physically and just spiritually. And
Yes.
so,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was with the Pharisees, where he may have seemed harsh, even in that, it wasn't to embarrass them. It wasn't to just, let me pick at them because they're annoying. Like, no, he was doing this
Mm-hmm.
also for their salvation, for their good. He didn't only address them and then ignore the actual victims, which I feel like sometimes, like you were saying, let me have compassion on him. He's about to graduate, whatever, while ignoring the actual victim that went through pain. And so
Mm-hmm.
Jesus never neglected either. He's like, I'm going to address this with you and point out those consequences because that's important. But let me also go tend to the victim. First and foremost,
Mm-hmm.
actually, is probably what he did. Well, let me go tend to that victim and like care for them as well. So he didn't deny
Mm-hmm.
either. But I feel like the church picking and choosing who should I show compassion to while ignoring the actual victims is what's crazy to me. Because Jesus didn't do that.
It's so crazy to me. And I think that, like, actually, the church really, really likes to pick and choose, like, when they want to be Christian. Like, the fact of the matter is, you cannot just pick and choose when you want to follow God because you're worried about how you look to other
Mm-hmm.
believers if you are actually ignoring what He really told you to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
ooh, and that has
And
got me.
what's
That's
ironic is that the church ends up looking so much worse when they're operating based off of how should I act in
mm-hmm,
order to preserve my image. Whenever they're
mm-hmm,
operating from that point of view, they end up falling so hard. Whereas if they were actually just doing whatever it is that God has asked them to do and tasked them with, they would be thriving not off of their own merit, but because God would actually bless it. But he's not trying to
exactly.
bless y'all when you're not operating from him. You're operating from self and from how
No,
you look. And
exactly.
that's why all that inconsistency is going on and nobody wants to trust you or fellowship with you because you're like, this
Because what's
isn't it.
going on?
It's not
Like,
it.
what's going on? Yeah. I'm trying to decide whether or not to get into this. But a few years ago, there was another school, another Christian institution in California. and one of the employees, she was an employee at that point, but she had graduated. There was a college associated with it. She was really, really ingrained in that community. Graduated from the college, but then she started working there, and she was assaulted and harassed by their VP. And when she called them out on it, when she reported him, like she talked to the president or whatever, all they did was move him from one leadership position to another. She still saw him all the time. She tried to talk to them, like, I still see him all the time. I don't feel safe. Like, what do I do about this? They ignored her. Straight up ignored her. And eventually it became like this whole big thing where a bunch of people found out, news articles were written and whatever. And I remember finding out about that and genuinely being so inspired by her. The fact that she was so willing to speak out about it and bring attention to the situation was huge to me. Like, I can never blame anyone for staying quiet about their trauma, because a lot of the times it's just re-traumatizing to talk about it, to get into it again. I could never blame anyone for not wanting to get into it, for not wanting to talk about it, for not wanting to report, for not wanting to go to the police. I could never blame anyone for any of that. But I will say, like, there is a power that comes from speaking up and letting other people know that they're not alone. And even if it's just somebody who's going through it, who's never going to speak up themselves, hearing your story, knowing, okay, like, I'm not the only one who's been through this, is hugely encouraging in ways that we may never even know. But I remember her story just being so encouraging to me, and to just like see the character of Christ played out like so clearly in standing up for herself and fighting for other victims. It was incredible. And I think that there is this power that comes from speaking out that we tend to ignore because it's hard and it's scary, and we think that people may not listen. And unfortunately, that is the case sometimes, but I mean, other times it can be really life altering to someone else.
And honestly, that got me thinking, even when we look in the Bible, like the Old Testament, all these prophets that God sent to speak out about all the injustices going on in his special people, or you could say his church, the church kept killing them, just kept killing them. And a lot of them, when I think of like Jeremiah, he didn't get to see the fruition of his work. Like for years, he was preaching God's truths and they just abused this man, right? And he didn't necessarily get to see the fruition of it. When we think of even Noah, right? He was like warning people for over a century and didn't get to see fruition from that either. And so sometimes we might think that using our voice may not have a point, especially if we don't get to see the fruition of it. If we don't see this radical change, we're like, oh, well, that was for nothing. But I look at those stories all the time and I'm inspired and it changes my life. So like just because we don't see its impact immediately, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact. So you never know how much you speaking out or sharing your story will be able to inspire someone to not leave God or not leave the church, or might inspire them to defend someone the way Christ defends us. So that's just what that reminded me of when you were sharing that story.
I'm glad that it resonated with you, because maybe like it's just a dream of mine, but I wish that more institutions within the church would be held accountable. People would speak up more, because the more people speak up, the more people start to listen and think, like, oh shoot, this is really a problem and we really need to address this. But so far that's just not been the case, unfortunately. Maybe that's why like I want to talk about it so much, is because it seems like no one else is, but I just feel like I see it happening so much more than I ever should have. People getting hurt by the church, and that causing a disillusionment from God and a relationship with him just in general. I don't even want to say religion. I'm just talking about relationship. It discourages people from a relationship with God, and that's what is just like so sad to me.
But I love that you've kind of tasked yourself with speaking out about this, because I think of Isaiah. God is like, who will go for us? And then that's when Isaiah goes, here am I, like, send me. If no one else is doing it, I'll do it. We got to be the change that we want to see. And so one piece of advice that I would give is that if you're in the church and you do have a relationship, but you're experiencing something like this, rather than leaving, be the person that starts that transformation, because it's definitely possible, especially with God on our side. For some people, you might not be in that position. And like Arianna suggested, take that step back from the church if you need to. dive into your faith and get to know God for yourself and see if he's worth following personally. If you've gotten to that point though, rather than abandoning the broken church, recognize that it's broken. It was always going to be broken. And that's kind of why we need each other, so that we can mentor each other, so that we can uplift each other. The righteous man may fall 7 times, but he gets back up again. So that's one thing that's encouraged me, is that like, I'm not going to let what you do distract from whatever God has called me to do. I'm going to get back up again and try to help those, one, that are willing to be helped. Try to bring light to someone who maybe has a hardened heart, but God could use me to soften it. Like, I don't know that leaving permanently ever, does anything. And that's even outside of religion. And I think, like I've mentioned before in the religion versus relationship episode, that the things that we find in religion that we dislike are things that we find anywhere. We will find similar situations in secular institutions, in the workplace. It doesn't matter where. I face these things outside of the church and inside of the church. And it's because the one common denominator is people. And a lot of the times, I like what you said, these are people that are taking the name of God and claiming it without having actually received God, without actually having harbored him in their hearts. And they're just taking his name, and it's defamation. Quite frankly, it's defamation. So I think we just need to be the change that we want to see, and just really get to know him for ourselves. Because once I did that, that's what has been able to keep me in. Because it's definitely not the people that kept me here. I've had to church hop a lot because I either felt like the people at one church I went to that I liked, I just felt like the people were very fake. And that's not to say that, everyone in the church has to be perfect. No, like, we're going to mess up, but that is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about just people that were struggling. I'm talking about habitual fakeness, facade.
Yeah.
And I could have just left, period. I'm like, if this is what the church is, that's not for me. But I just kept searching because I'm like, there's got to be someone out there. There's got to be a people out there somewhere that are actually authentic, that actually follow Christ because they love him, because it's actually taken root in their lives. And I was able to. And so unfortunately, there's going to be awful people everywhere, but there's also going to be sincere people if we're willing to find them. And once we couple up with them, like, the power is unmatched. Like, when Jesus says where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, truly I am there. He's not even joking. So like, there is so much beauty in community, but in the right community. So you don't have to like stick with a church just because they say that they're a church. If they don't have God living in them, if they don't exemplify him or bear fruit, they're not really a church. They're not really followers of Christ. They're not Christians. Christians means to be a follower of Christ. And God was clear. He's like, people will say that they have religion, but they will have a form of it while denying its power. This isn't really godliness. James 1 verse 26 to 27 says, if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. I liked verse 26 as well, because we've heard the pure and undefiled religion part, but he's talking about what kind of religion is useless, and it's someone who doesn't think before they speak. So probably someone that's actually hurtful, where they're either doing action that wasn't God ordained, or they're withholding action that they should be taking. He's like, your religion is worthless. It's useless. So I love that, like, religion itself isn't bad, but it's what religion? What kind of religion are you claiming? Is it the worthless kind or the pure and undefiled kind that stems from a relationship with God, like you were saying?
One of the things that you touched on, this really needs to be like reiterated. One of the commandments, do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And a lot of the times we just think about using God's name like carelessly in conversation, like as slang or like to cuss someone out. But I remember learning that in the Bible, names were associated with character. So if you claim the name of Christ but don't have the character of Christ, ignore the character of Christ, that is taking his name in vain. And that's quite literally one of the commandments, which means that it is one of the most important things to God. Just like it is so important that you show love for others, it is so important not to say that you're a follower of Christ and then disregard all of his children. And just like I said earlier, God doesn't play about that. His name really isn't gonna be mocked, and he's not okay with that. And that's something that I feel like we miss too often, or we take way too lightly.
Exactly. I think there's different types of people who inflict church hurt. I feel like there's the newer Christian where they don't know much yet. They kind of just got here. I remember one pastor like sharing a story. He's like, Yeah, when I first finally realized that I think I believe in God, he went to his homeboy and was like, so I think I'm religious now. And his friend was like, no effing way. I am too. You can tell they're like brand new. And so how'd they celebrate? They went out and got wasted. And so it's like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes so like they
Crazy.
genuinely were excited about the Lord, but they had
So
just come out the world.
funny.
They are brand new babies, right? So that's how
Right.
they celebrated. They didn't know better. And so that's why it's like
Mhm.
it's important to take certain things with a grain of salt when you see that this is a baby Christian, you know, they just got
Mhm.
here. We can't hold them to the high up standard, right? And then there's someone who maybe is mature in the faith, but this was just a moment of weakness for them, not a consistent character trait, not something that was habitual. And usually that type of person will repent for it and come and reconcile. You know what I mean? And if that doesn't happen, then there's like that third type of person that may inflict it, which is people that are just not aware of their condition, that are taking on the name of Christ without really knowing what he stands for. Or you do
Yeah.
know it and you just don't give a crap, in which case you're on the enemy side, masquerading. That's the wolf in sheep's clothing. So we have all these different types that might have inflicted church hurt on you, but like on any of us, and I see that, which is why the Bible does have some provisions for like how to deal with church hurt, which I thought we could like run through real quick. John 1:11 talks about how Jesus came to his own and his own people didn't receive him. So one, he was rejected even though he was their God. And there's another place in Matthew 23 where he says, "Woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites." And he talks about how they're just rotten on the inside while looking fancy on the outside. And Judas, one of his own disciples, betrayed him, right? Into death. That's another person in religion who betrayed him. It says he was despised and rejected by men in Isaiah 53. You already talked about how the church isn't perfect. If you want to look into where it's talked about in the Bible, there's 1 Corinthians 1:10 where Paul rebukes all these different divisions in the church. There's Galatians 2 verses 11 through 14 where Paul is publicly confronting another religious leader. You haven't heard of him. His name is Peter, and he confronts him publicly about his hypocrisy. There's Revelation 2 and 3, where Jesus is giving specific rebukes to the seven churches. So Matthew 18, verse 15 through 17, lays out a pretty detailed process for addressing someone who sins against you through personal confrontation, involving others if necessary. Like if they're not listening to you, then maybe go and grab a friend who can come and kind of like mediate the situation so that it doesn't escalate or so that there's no bias going on, and you can confront them with gentleness and love, trying to restore them. If it's still not working, you can involve church leadership, someone you trust, someone who maybe is a good mentor, and try to confront the situation again. And if they're not, basically then treat them like a non-believer. They're like, if they're not going to act like a Christian, then you might as well regard them as if they're not one. So God is pretty strict about that too. And then yes, there's the part in Colossians 3, Ephesians 4, and in Romans 12, it's talking about how to combat this type of behavior when you're combating evil. Usually retaliating with that same spirit will not accomplish anything. But I know that I've messed up a lot, that there have probably been moments where I was meant to be, you know, a light, where I was meant to be an example to somebody else. And rather than reflecting God's love, I might have been bitter or unkind in that moment. And so there's that quote that says, you might be the only Bible somebody else reads. And there's probably been times where I fumbled that. But God has forgiven me anyway. So I think it's important for me also to like, even if they don't seem sorry and I'm like, I would really love some validation and an apology right now. And it's probably owed and deserved. But unfortunately, we don't live in a fair world. We may not always get that and we can't always force it out of someone. We should definitely advocate so that this kind of stuff doesn't continue. But we're still called to forgive one another the way that Christ forgave us. And he forgave us for a lot. You know what I mean? Constantly. So Ephesians 4 specifically says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger be put away from you, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. And Romans 12 says not to be overcome by evil, but to overcome evil with good. I wanted to point out Psalm 147 verse 3 says he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And Isaiah 61 verse 1 says something similar where it says he has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to comfort all who mourn. And you already mentioned Matthew 11, which is, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So God is not a distant God where it's just all about law, but He also truly identifies with us. He went through heartbreak Himself. He dealt with loss, He dealt with being hurt by the church, He dealt with being persecuted and bullied and all these things. So he has empathy for you. He is near the brokenhearted. He has been brokenhearted. So he identifies with you and not with the oppressor.
I'm really happy that you shared that because I don't feel like it's talked about enough, like ways to address not only church hurt, but also conflict within the church. Because a lot of the times, like when someone hurts us, we want to just jump to calling them out in front of everyone or cutting them off or just, like whatever. Like, what else can I do? But I think that like often those steps are like overlooked. And I think that's a really important place to start. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that also.
Unfortunately, sometimes people don't know that they hurt you, whether they're just oblivious or it was a genuine misunderstanding. And so I think it's good that those steps are in place so that it kind of covers that. If there was a misunderstanding and they genuinely didn't have intention to hurt you or weren't aware of it, when you go and you confront them about this or bring a friend or bring a spiritual leader into it, it really, softens any aggression and allows for the truth to be aired out. And resolution can happen rather than letting it fester and going off on your own, which is part of why having community is really important within the religious context so that you will have people that have your back and that can bring clarity to a situation that otherwise might have brought you mental anguish and turmoil when it could have been solved with a conversation. But, kind of like your experience where you brought that out, you tried to air it out and it was still being covered up, then that's when the church should expel that person until they can understand what they did and repent for that. And while we may not have the authority or we might not know how to do that or be able to do that, God sees everything. And God says, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." And that's a promise.
Not only does he say vengeance is mine, he also says that he will fight for us. And we just need to we just need to chill out. We just need to
Right.
But I do think that there is a difference between trying to take revenge and calling someone out publicly like you need to do sometimes. There is no accountability within the church on how we should be acting too much of the time. And so if you do need to be called out, use it as a wake-up call.
It's precisely because I love this church, precisely because I love God and believe in what the church is supposed to be doing, that we should be holding them accountable. It's not to just talk crap about them behind their back or anything. It's not just to throw shade.
No.
It's because we love the church, we love these people, and we love first and foremost God, that we feel that responsibility to hold them accountable. And if we don't, we're doing it a disservice.
We need reform, within these institutions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap things up?
Girl, I've already been talking for 2 hours. I don't
Right.
know that there is. I don't know that there is.
Well,
But
go ahead.
no, my fault, gang. I was just gonna say I'm really grateful to be able to have this conversation with you. Listen, when this gets out, I need y'all to know how much difficulty we had being able to actually set this up and to actually be able to have this conversation. It was hard.
Right.
It was heavy. So my prayer is that it gets where it needs to be. And I'm just super honored that you asked me to talk about this with you for the chance to have this conversation, because I wish it was one that happened more often. And I wish that it was one that reached more people.
And I'm really grateful that you accepted and were willing to be vulnerable and authentic about it, regardless of, what people might say. Who knows? It's definitely difficult to talk about this on a platform. It's a small platform, mind you, but
Right.
still, the fact that you're willing to talk about it is I really appreciate it, and I know other people will too. And I already feel inspired by it. So if you even just helped me, I hope it was worth it because I loved everything that you said. So thank you so much. And I feel like it gave us a chance to kind of catch up because I don't get to see you much. So
I was just thinking about it. I was like, you know what? This girl, literally, we used to have hours long conversations. She came and stayed with me in Puerto Rico once during the pandemic, mind you. So it was already a tough time, but yeah, it was a nice little catch up, a nice little
moment.
excuse. us to talk again.
Yes, love it. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of
And
course.
anyone else, if y'all are watching and y'all have some, questions or some qualms or, whatever the case may be, drop a comment. You can do it on, down here on YouTube. You can do it on our socials. If you have questions for Arianna specifically, you can drop them there too, and we'll make sure that she gets them and can respond. Not the.
I
Anyways,
would be I would be happy to.
so thanks for watching this episode and hope to see you guys next time.